Your name tag says Mark's retired babysitter. The receptionist giggled as she handed it to me. I stared at the elegant font etched on thick cream cardstock, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The room was buzzing with laughter, champagne glasses clinking, flashes of camera phones capturing smiles that weren't meant for me. I pinned the name tag to my blazer with trembling fingers. Vanessa walked by, sipping from a tall flute of sparkling rose, and gave me that rehearsed smile she wore at every family event. "Isn't it cute?" she said. A little inside joke. I said nothing. I just walked in, letting the soft soles of my shoes sink into the thick carpet of the ballroom. Mark's company was celebrating its IPO. He was on stage earlier thanking the mentors who shaped him. I wasn't among them. I stood near the back beside a potted ficus, blending in like I always seem to these days. The music was upbeat, the lighting warm. It should have felt like a proud moment. But all I could feel was the sting of that single phrase pressed against my chest. Babysitter. Not mother. Not mentor. Just someone who once watched him while he slept. I remember when he was 6 and afraid of the thunder. How he'd curl beside me and whisper, "Mom, make it go away." I used to think those moments counted. That they'd be remembered. A tall man with silver hair clapped Mark on the back and said, "That speech was gold." Mark laughed, eyes scanning the room. When they met mine, he gave a polite nod, like you might to a former teacher or distant cousin. It wasn't cruel. It was worse, neutral. I walked toward the dessert table, needing something to do with my hands. Vanilla cupcakes. Fruit tarts. Nothing I'd baked. Vanessa had hired a boutique caterer from downtown. "Carol," someone called. I turned to see Lauren, one of Mark's assistants. "Vanessa says you used to be a nanny?" she asked, eyes wide with admiration, like it was a charming bit of trivia. "Sort of," I replied. "For a long time." "That's so sweet. I love when families keep in touch with old staff." "Old staff?" I nodded, unsure what to say. I watched as Lauren rejoined the table where Vanessa was laughing. My daughter-in-law leaned in and whispered something to the group. One woman glanced at me and smirked. I excused myself and walked toward the restroom. I wasn't going to cry. I hadn't cried in years. I looked at myself in the mirror. Pale lipstick. Blue earrings. I'd chosen them because Mark once said they reminded him of the ocean. I wondered if he even remembered. I took a deep breath and returned to the party. When I passed Vanessa, she said, "You okay, Carol? You look overwhelmed." I smiled, just soaking it all in. She leaned closer. "We weren't sure you'd come. Thought you might feel out of place." "Why would I?" I asked, my voice calm. "This is my son's big day." She blinked. "Of course. You're right." But her eyes said something else entirely. I walked away, toward the exit, past the glowing backdrop with Mark's company logo, the professional photographers, the congratulations balloons. I stepped outside into the cool air. My car was parked 2 blocks down. I didn't mind the walk. With each step, the sound of the party grew fainter. The name tag was still on my chest. I pulled it off gently, folded it in half and slipped it into my purse. I wasn't done with it. Not yet. When I returned home that night, the house greeted me with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the hollow sort that echoes off the walls when no one has spoken your name in hours. I hung up my coat, placed my purse gently on the hallway table, and reached inside. My fingers closed around the folded name tag. I did not open it. Not yet. The kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon and lemon cleaner. I had cleaned earlier that morning, just in case Mark or Vanessa dropped by after the event. They had not. They never did. I stood at the sink, staring out the window at the bare branches in the backyard. I used to host cookouts out there. Mark and his friends would play tag while I flipped burgers. Vanessa had never attended those. She said the grill smoke irritated her allergies. I made tea. Not because I wanted it but because the ritual helped. Boil the water. Select the mug. Earl Grey, 2 sugars, no milk. The clink of the spoon against porcelain grounded me. I carried the cup to the living room and sat on the edge of the couch, not leaning back. I stared at the empty armchair across from me. It used to be Daniel's, my late husband. He would have had something to say about tonight. Something dry and cutting that made me laugh. I missed his laugh. I missed being someone's person. I took a sip of tea. Warm. Sweet. Pointless. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily. It was nearly midnight. The ceremony had ended hours ago. I wondered if Vanessa was still at the after-party, laughing in some rooftop bar. I wondered if she remembered what she said to me, or if it was just another performance for her. I thought about Lauren's question, whether I had been the nanny. I supposed in some ways I had. I changed Mark's diapers. I drove him to piano lessons. I stayed up with him during every fever. That was not nanny work. That was motherhood. But no one at that party saw it that way. They saw a woman with soft shoes and thinning silver hair. A guest from the past. Not part of the present. I stood up and walked to the hallway table. Took out the name tag. Smoothed it flat. The edges were creased. I looked at the words again. Mark's retired babysitter. That was all they saw. All Vanessa wanted them to see. I placed it on the kitchen counter and stared at it. As if staring could erase it. The refrigerator hummed. The heater clicked on. I felt every noise like a push against my skin. I opened the cabinet above the sink and took down a small box. Inside were old notes from Mark. Mother's Day cards he made with crayons. One said, "You are my hero, Mom." Another had a drawing of me with a cape. I held them next to the name tag. The contrast was blinding. I folded the tag again and slid it into the box. Not to keep it safe but to remember. Not everything that is thrown at you has to be thrown away. Some things need to be kept as evidence. I turned off the kitchen light. Walked upstairs. The hallway creaked under my feet. I paused outside Mark's old bedroom. The door was ajar. The moonlight spilled across the floor, highlighting the dusty shelves and the faded posters still clinging to the walls. I used to peek in at night to make sure he was breathing. Now the air inside felt foreign. I closed the door slowly. In my own room, I changed into my nightgown and sat on the bed. The pillow on Daniel's side was still plumped. I never stopped preparing for people who no longer came. I lay down, the blankets pulled to my chin, and stared at the ceiling. I did not cry. I just counted the seconds between each breath. The name tag was in a box. The box was in the kitchen. And somewhere inside me, a quiet decision had started to form. The next morning I woke up before the sun. Habit mostly. Years of early school runs and Sunday pancakes had set my internal clock. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long moment, letting the silence settle. The room was cold. I pulled on my robe, soft with age, and shuffled downstairs. The kitchen was still dark. I flicked on the light. The small box with the folded name tag sat untouched where I had left it. I poured water into the kettle, measured out coffee, toasted a slice of bread I did not want. The ordinary rhythm of it all calmed me. After breakfast, I opened my email. Just bills. A newsletter from the church. A coupon for bath towels I would not buy. I clicked through them like someone checking a mailbox out of obligation. Then I paused. There was a new message. From Vanessa. Subject line. Thank you for attending. No greeting. No warmth. Just 2 short paragraphs thanking me for being present and reminding me that Mark's schedule would be tight the next few weeks due to investor meetings. She ended with, "Let us know if you need anything." I closed the email. No reply. There was nothing I needed from her. I spent the rest of the day cleaning the upstairs linen closet. Not because it needed it, but because order makes silence easier to bear. I found a box of old photographs, most of them from Mark's school years. Science fairs. Soccer games. Halloween costumes. One showed me kneeling beside him at his kindergarten graduation, holding his little hand as he held a paper diploma. I was smiling so hard my eyes crinkled. His were shining with pride. I traced the edge of the photo with my thumb, set it aside. Later that evening I went to the grocery store. I did not need much. Just milk, eggs, a few apples. As I walked down the frozen aisle I spotted her. Vanessa. In stilettos and a trench coat the color of bone. Her back was turned, but I recognized the way she held her phone out at arm's length to take a photo of the flower display. She always documented things that looked more generous than they were. I could have walked past. I almost did. But she turned and our eyes met. Her smile was automatic. Tight. "Carol," she said, as if surprised to see me in a place as ordinary as a grocery store. "How are you?" "Fine," I replied. "Getting a few things." That is wonderful, she said, glancing at my basket. Just eggs and apples. She held up her own. A bottle of wine. Imported cheese. Stocking up for a little dinner we are hosting Friday. Just some of Mark's colleagues. You know how he loves to entertain. I nodded. Of course. She tilted her head. We were thinking of inviting you, but we were not sure if you would be comfortable. You seemed a bit emotional at the ceremony. I smiled. No need to worry. I have plenty to keep me busy. Her eyes lingered on me, searching for a crack. When she found none, she said, well, take care, and turned down another aisle. I finished shopping and went home. The sun was setting as I unpacked the groceries. I lit a small candle on the windowsill, something Daniel used to do on cold evenings. The flame flickered, steady and small. I sat at the kitchen table and pulled the box back toward me. Opened it. The name tag lay folded on top of Mark's old drawings. I placed the kindergarten photo beside it. 2 versions of me. One seen. One erased. I did not feel angry. I felt certain. Like something long buried was slowly rising to the surface. Something patient. Something sharp. 2 days later, I stood at my kitchen sink washing dishes that did not need washing. The plate I had used for toast. The single mug from my morning tea. I wiped the same spoon 3 times before setting it down. My eyes drifted to the small corkboard above the counter. It held faded snapshots, recipe cards, and a calendar with a grocery coupon pinned beside Mark's childhood drawing of a stick figure family labeled us. A knock at the door broke the silence. It was soft, uncertain. I dried my hands slowly and opened the door. It was Rachel, my neighbor. She looked windblown and out of breath. Hi, Carol, she said. I hope I am not interrupting. Not at all, I replied. Come in. She stepped inside, clutching something to her chest. An envelope. A large one. Her eyes darted toward the box on my kitchen table, the one I had not put away. She did not mention it. I just got this by accident, she said. It was left in my mailbox. It is for you. I took the envelope. It was thick. The return address read Langston and Hayes Financial Services. My breath caught. That was Mark's investment firm. Thank you, I said. Rachel hesitated. Carol, I saw the photos from the ceremony on social media. I just wanted to say, I thought the tag thing was cruel. I looked at her. She meant it. Her voice had no pity in it. Just quiet solidarity. I appreciate that, I said. She smiled sadly, then left me alone with the envelope. I sat down at the kitchen table, ran my fingers over the seal, then opened it. Inside was a printout of Mark's executive profile. There was a new headshot. He looked confident, slightly airbrushed, framed by modern fonts and statistics. Under mentors and influences, it listed names. His college professor. His first employer. Even a high school coach. My name was not there. Not even as a footnote. I stared at the paper until the letters blurred. Then I placed it next to the name tag. Babysitter. Not mentor. Not mother. I folded the document and slipped it into the box. Another artifact of erasure. That evening I went for a walk. The cold air helped. The neighborhood was quiet. Lawns trimmed. Christmas lights blinking from porch railings. I passed the Grant house. Their son had just gotten into law school. They had a big banner out front. I paused to look at it. I remembered the way Mark used to run through our yard barefoot, chasing fireflies. He used to call them light wishes. I came home and sat on the couch without turning on the lights. The house hummed. Familiar. Empty. I opened the old photo album on my lap. Page after page of birthdays, homemade Halloween costumes, school lunches packed with napkin notes. I traced each image with my finger. Not out of sentiment but to feel something real. Something that had not been rewritten. There was a photo of me holding Mark as a newborn. My hair was longer then. My face younger. My eyes hopeful. Daniel had taken that picture. He used to joke that I was the glue that held our home together. I closed the album. My hands were steady. I stood and returned it to the shelf. When I turned, I saw my reflection in the window. Not weak. Not bitter. Just clear. Something inside me had shifted. Not like a sudden snap, but like a heavy door slowly swinging open. I did not know what I was going to do next, but I knew it would begin with remembering who I really was, long before they tried to reduce me to a punchline. The next morning, I went through my closet looking for the box labeled Daniel's Files. It had been years since I opened it. Inside were tax documents, a few warranty cards, and a leather folder with our will, updated just after Mark turned 30. I flipped through the papers slowly. One notarized page caught my eye. It was Daniel's handwritten letter to Mark, meant to be read only if something ever happened to both of us. I had never sent it. It spoke about character, about the quiet strength of loyalty, and the debt a man owes to the people who shaped him. At the bottom, Daniel had written, "No legacy means anything if it forgets its roots." I placed the letter beside the name tag in the box and closed the lid. At noon I went to the library, not to check out a book but to think. There was something comforting about the hush of that place. I sat near the large window, the one that looked out onto Main Street. People walked past bundled in scarves, hurrying toward warmth and errands. I sipped coffee from a paper cup and opened my notebook. At first I just wrote down memories. Not elaborate ones. Just details. Mark's first spelling bee. The way his hand used to search for mine in crowded parking lots. His voice calling out "Mom" at the top of the playground slide. I wrote for almost an hour. Then I stopped. Across the room, I noticed someone watching me. A woman in her early 30s with a kind face and a knit cap. She smiled when I looked up. I smiled back. She approached my table. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Carol Henderson?" I nodded slowly. "Yes. I think you know my mother," she said. "Susan Larkin. She mentioned you a few weeks ago when we were talking about the ceremony at Langston and Hayes." "Oh," I said. "Yes, I remember Susan." The young woman hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "She said something about how you were treated there." I just wanted to say I am sorry. It was not right. Her voice was low but firm. "Some of us noticed." I looked at her. Really looked. She was not saying it out of pity. She was saying it because something inside her refused to stay silent. "Thank you," I said. She smiled again, then left. I sat very still for a moment. Then I picked up my pen and began writing again. That night I opened the old box one more time. I took out the folded tag. Then I did something I had not planned. I pressed it flat. I took out Daniel's letter and copied his closing line into my notebook. "No legacy means anything if it forgets its roots." I left the notebook open on the table and made myself a cup of tea. As the kettle boiled, I looked around the kitchen. Nothing had changed. But I had. Not loudly. Not with rage. But in the way stone shifts beneath running water. I no longer needed Vanessa or Mark to define who I had been. I had lived it. I had built it. I knew the truth. And soon others would too. The following Friday came with a drizzle that coated the windows in soft gray streaks. I stood by the sink with a towel in my hand, staring at the street as cars rolled past, wipers dancing. Across town, Mark and Vanessa were hosting their dinner. The one Vanessa had mentioned at the store. The one I was not invited to. I did not feel left out. I felt resolved. I had not planned to leave the house, but something about the quiet made me change my mind. I changed into a navy coat, pulled on gloves and slipped the leather folder with Daniel's letter into my purse. I drove downtown, passing familiar landmarks. The florist where I used to buy daisies in the spring. The bookstore where Mark once had a meltdown because they were out of a specific comic. It all felt close and far at the same time. I arrived at the office building 15 minutes early. It was closed for the weekend, but the security guard recognized me. I had brought cookies once during a holiday party years ago. I told him I just needed to leave something for Mark in his executive mailbox. He smiled and buzzed me in. I rode the elevator up alone. The hallway was quiet. I found Mark's office door. Dark glass, sleek handle. His name etched in silver. I placed the envelope inside the mail slot. It was not dramatic. It was just necessary. Inside the envelope was a copy of Daniel's letter, a copy of my name tag, and one single photograph Mark at 5 years old, clinging to my neck after his first day of school, his lunchbox swinging from one hand. I wrote nothing else. No note. No message. Let him sit with the truth in silence the way I had. On the way home I stopped by the grocery store. I picked up fresh lemons, flour, and a bottle of vanilla extract. That night I baked. The house filled with the scent of lemon cake and sugar, the kind I used to make when Mark aced a test or lost a tooth. It was not nostalgia. It was reclaiming. I wrapped the cake in parchment and tied it with twine. The next morning, I left it on Rachel's porch with a thank you note. Not for the envelope. For seeing me. For not pretending I was invisible. Back inside, I brewed coffee and opened my notebook. I had written 17 pages so far. Not a memoir. Just moments. Things no one else would know if I did not record them. The time Mark asked if hugs were a kind of armor. The night Daniel stayed up sewing a button on Mark's stuffed bear so it would not look blind. I wrote until my hand cramped. Then I kept writing. When the phone rang, I did not recognize the number. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later it rang again. Same number. Picked up. Mom. Mark's voice. Hesitant. Softer than I remembered. I got your envelope. Silence stretched. I said nothing. I read the letter, he said. Dad's letter. More silence. I could hear him breathing slow and uneven. I do not know what to say. I still said nothing. There was a pause. I am sorry, Mom, he said finally. Not loud. Not rehearsed. Real. The kind of sorry that does not fix things but admits they broke. I let the silence hang. Then I said, thank you for calling. He asked if he could visit next week. I told him I would think about it. And I meant it. I did not owe anyone immediate forgiveness. But I could consider presence. I hung up and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was trying to push through the clouds. Not fully there. But trying. That was enough for today. The following Tuesday, the knock on my door came just after 3 in the afternoon. I had not told Mark whether to come or not, but I had baked banana bread anyway. Not out of hope. Just instinct. I opened the door and there he was. My son. In a gray wool coat, holding a paper bag that looked awkward in his hand. His eyes searched mine, unsure. I stepped aside. He entered quietly like someone walking into a chapel. He handed me the bag. Inside were 3 lemons, a small jar of honey, and a box of tea. I almost smiled. Not because of the contents, but because he had remembered what I used to make when he had colds as a child. He sat at the kitchen table while I poured tea. The silence was thick but not sharp. Just full. We drank slowly. I waited. He finally spoke. I read your pages, he said. I looked up. He pulled a few folded sheets of paper from his coat pocket. Photocopies. I had left them in the envelope on purpose, tucked behind the photo. That memory, he said. About me being afraid of thunder. I had forgotten. I nodded. That is why I wrote it down. He looked down at his tea. Mom, I did not know how far I had drifted. I said nothing. He kept talking. Vanessa. She can be strong-willed. But I let her shape too much of how I handled family. His voice trembled slightly. It was easier to delegate emotional things. I watched him. He looked older than I remembered. Not in years. In weight. You let yourself forget, I said. And that is something only you can fix. He nodded. I want to try. I stood and walked to the cabinet. Pulled down a tin of cookies I had made the night before. I placed them in front of him. Try with actions, I said. Not promises. He reached for one. Ate it slowly. We sat without speaking for several minutes. It was not warm, but it was real. He stood to leave not long after. As he reached the door he turned. Do you think Dad would be disappointed in me? I met his eyes. No, I said. But he would have expected better. Mark swallowed. So do I, he said quietly. I closed the door behind him, locked it gently, then leaned against it. Not out of exhaustion. Out of relief. I walked to the living room and sat down with my notebook. I added a new memory. This one fresh. Not perfect. But progress. I wrote. Today my son came home. Not to visit. But to face himself. The light outside was beginning to soften, turning gold across the tops of the trees. I folded the page, placed it carefully with the others and closed the book. The house was still. But it no longer felt empty. Only quiet. The kind of quiet you earn. 3 days later I received a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A real letter, the kind that makes you pause before opening because you can feel the weight of effort behind it. It was from Mark. His handwriting was still the same. Slightly slanted, a little cramped near the edges, like he was always trying to fit too much into a space that was never quite big enough. He thanked me for the tea, for listening, for not turning him away. He wrote, "I see you now, not just as my mother, but as a person I should have respected all along." He admitted that he had been blind, that he had let convenience take the place of care, that he was ashamed. I folded the letter carefully and placed it between 2 pages in my notebook, not because I forgave everything, but because honesty deserved to be kept. Later that afternoon I went to the community center, where I sometimes volunteered. There was a senior storytelling group meeting that evening. I had never read anything of mine before. I usually just listened, but something had shifted. I brought my notebook and sat in the 3rd row, watching as one woman read a story about her late husband and a camping trip gone wrong. Everyone laughed softly. When it was my turn, I stood and read one of the pages I had written. It was the one about the time Mark had asked if hugs were armor. When I finished, the room was quiet in that good way, when people are sitting with your words not because they are unsure but because they have understood. Afterward, a man in a plaid shirt came up to me and said, "That was one of the most real things I have heard in a long time." I nodded and thanked him. That night back home I set a second place at the table. Not because I expected anyone, just because I could. I made soup. The same kind Daniel loved, chicken and wild rice with too much thyme. I ate slowly. I lit the candle on the windowsill. The flame flickered gently, reflected in the glass. The house did not feel lonely. It felt lived in. Around 8:30 the phone rang. It was Mark again. "Vanessa wants to talk," he said. I paused, letting the air between us settle. "About what?" I asked. "About the way she has handled things. About the things she said. She knows she was cruel." I did not respond right away. Then I said, "She can call if she means it. But I am not performing forgiveness on schedule." Mark was quiet. Then he said, "Understood." I heard something else in his voice. Not frustration. Respect. The next morning there was a small package at my door. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Inside was a framed photograph. The one I had included in the envelope. Mark and I at his first day of school. He had written on the back, "I forgot this moment. But now I never will." I placed it on the hallway table beside the vase of fresh daisies I had bought that morning. Not because anyone was visiting, just because I deserved flowers too. The next weekend arrived with unexpected warmth. The kind of spring air that makes the daffodils lean forward just a little more and convinces you to open a window even if it is still technically too early. I spent the morning wiping down the porch furniture. The rocking chair Daniel had built was still sturdy. Its white paint faded to soft ivory from years of sun. Around noon the doorbell rang. I was not surprised this time. It was Vanessa. She stood on the porch in a soft sweater and flats, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her eyes, usually sharp with calculation, looked unsure. I opened the screen door but did not move aside. "Hi, Carol," she said. "Thank you for answering." I nodded once. "Would you like to sit?" She hesitated. "Only if it is all right with you." I motioned to the second chair. We sat in silence for a while. Birds chirped somewhere overhead. A car passed, playing jazz faintly through its rolled-down window. Finally Vanessa spoke. "I was wrong," she said. "I let my ambition speak louder than my conscience. And I thought that making you small would make me seem bigger." She took a breath. "It was ugly. I am ashamed." I listened. She did not fidget. She did not look away. She simply sat with the discomfort, which in its own way mattered more than the apology. "When I first met Mark," she continued, "he talked about you like you were a lighthouse. Steady. Unshakable. And I let that threaten me instead of grounding me." I tilted my head slightly. "You cannot rewrite the past," I said. "But you can stop editing the present to suit your pride." She nodded. "I know." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "I know you do not need this," she said, "but I want you to have it." I took the envelope and opened it. Inside was a letter. Not typed. Handwritten. It was her telling Mark's colleagues the truth about who I was. Not a babysitter. Not a relic. But the woman who raised him, who shaped his work ethic, who taught him resilience. She had asked them to update the internal company profile. To correct the record. I folded the letter and set it in my lap. Thank you, I said. She stood. I will let you be. I did not stop her. I watched her walk down the steps and across the yard. She moved differently. Not smaller. Just quieter. I looked out at the street for a long time. Then I walked back inside, placed the envelope beside the photo on the hallway table, and poured myself a glass of lemonade. I brought it back out to the porch and sat in Daniel's chair. The sky was the color of worn denim. The air smelled like something beginning. I opened my notebook again. I wrote, sometimes the hardest people to forgive are the ones who tried to erase you with a smile. But when they come back carrying their own shame, you can see that they finally met themselves. The wind rustled the pages slightly. I closed the book and leaned back. The rocking chair creaked gently beneath me. Not from age. From memory.